Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm Wallace and I'll be your guide for this video. Recently I've taken to watching Deepdive by Colby Paulson, in which he optimizes various builds for D&D 5e, and I was curious as to what that would look like for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So I'm going to be going through the majority of the builds he's released in the last couple of years, starting from the beginning, with his first build ever being a Hexblade Warlock Polearm Master build, which focused on sustaining damage, or damage that could be maintained over an entire combat. I would like to note that while I've purchased a number of Pathfinder 2nd Edition source books, I haven't had much opportunity to play as my local group seem glued to 5e. So if I make some faulty assumptions on how things work, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'll include links to the level-by-level based builds for the classes I did today, as well as a link to Deepdive, so you can check out Colby's videos. If you like what you see, please click the like and subscribe buttons and comment below. Looking at Pathfinder 2nd Edition, when I think of a Gish character, which is a character that mixes melee and magic, my mind immediately springs to the Magus, as it's specifically designed to mesh spellcasting and melee attacks together. In order to figure out how my damage compared to other classes, I needed a baseline. And I decided to use a polearm fighter with no feats, just basic class weapon attack and damage improvements, along with whatever weapon rooms I used in the Magus build. After completing my original build, I was sad to see that for a large part of this character's career, its damage was at or below the damage of the baseline fighter. This drove me to see what I could do with a fighter Barbarian build, and the numbers were much better. No lucky happenstance though, my Dark Archive book arrived before I made the video, and I found a way to get the damage of the Magus up to a decent amount. This character is still outdone by a fighter Barbarian though, and I'll share the key parts of that build at the end of the video. In a long-standing D4 tradition, I also used archetypes to help maximize the damage potential of this character, similar to his propensity for multiclassing in 5e. I also decided to not use either the dual class or free archetype options from the Dungeon Mastery Guide, as I can't guarantee that they're available at every table. That decision led to my choice of ancestry, which is Ancient Elf, as they get a free archetype dedication as a racial feature. If you are at a table that gives a free archetype, you might stay with the Ancient Elf for a third archetype, which would be useful for this build. The archetype dedication feat I went with was Barbarian, with the Giant Instinct, for the extra damage. Now, using an oversized weapon also comes with the Clumsy condition, which gives you a -1 to AC and reflex saves. But as you'll eventually be wearing breastplate, you'll eventually ignore the AC penalty with attribute increases as your dexterity modifier surpasses the dexterity modifier for the breastplate. I would also like to note that I had considered dropping the Barbarian archetype dedication and just running a Magus Psychic, but the Magus Psychic combination doesn't overtake the Magus Barbarian Psychic build until the latter half of the character's career. At level 17 it's only a 12-point difference. Considering that most campaigns take place in lower levels and the added flexibility of rage to the build, I decided to stay with the 3-class build. I went with Martial Disciple as my background, because the proficiency in athletics and the plus to strength with a free bump in intelligence goes well with my build. As for attributes, I started with a 16 strength to maximize attack and damage with a polearm, 14 dexterity for improved AC and reflex saves, and a 12 constitution, the highest I could get at start with a MAD or multiple attribute dependent build. I prioritize AC over hit points, as your AC benefits your effective health more than hit points do. Intelligence, which is my spellcasting stat and also contributes to damage, is also a 16. Wisdom and Charisma were my dump stats for this build and were left at 10. In regards to skills, I prioritized Athletics to help with combat maneuvers like Trip, and Arcana to help identify spells and magic items. For the rest of your skills, pick what you like, as it fits your character concept, as they don't have a significant effect on combat, though from videos I've watched, recall knowledge can also be important. As a Magus, you're trained in simple weapons, martial weapons, and unarmed attacks. You're also trained in light armor, medium armor, and armor defense. My starting ancestry feat is Nimble Elf, for the increased movement, and Familiar, just for some added flexibility in combat. My general feat was Quick Jump, but again, pick what you like, I'm just building around the concept of battlefield mobility. Now to talk about the Magus class. Let's see what the book has to say about the Magus, as shared on the Archives of Nexus. Combining the physicality and technique of a warrior with the ability to cast arcane magic, you seek to perfect the art of fusing spell and strike. While the hefty tome you carry reflects hours of conducting arcane research, your enemies need no reminder of your training. They recognize it as you take them down. The primary feature of the Magus class is Spell Strike. This allows you to combine a spell with a melee strike, which means combining a cantrip with your polearm for sustained damage, while saving your spell slots for your burst or nova damage times. It's important to note that Magus only have 4 spells from the spellcasting feature at any one time, so we'll be rotating them throughout the life of the build. We'll be pairing it with the inexorable Iron Hybrid Study, so it works with polearms. Spell Strike takes up 2 of the actions of our 3-action economy and requires a recharge before it can activate again, which requires an action with the Concentrate trait. This means we'll be doing a round with a Spell Strike and an Arcane Cascade, which buffs your damage by 1 to 3 depending on your level of weapon specialization after using a Spell Strike, followed by a second round where we use Moment of Clarity, a Barbarian feat that requires us to take an action to gain the ability to use a concentration action, Spell Strike Recharge, which requires a concentrate action, and a Basic Strike, which will benefit from Arcane Cascade. This accounts for all our actions in a round. This also means that your damage per round will be decreased when you have to move, but I'm going to follow D4's method of assuming optimal conditions for damage calculations. As a side note, using Arcane Cascade with a polearm gives us half our level and temporary hit points, which is a nice little survival bump. At level 2, we're going to pick up Expansive Spell Strike. This allows your Spell Strike to utilize a spell that doesn't require an attack roll to hit, and spells with an AoE component, allowing you to make use of all those juicy higher level spells for a ton of damage when needed. I'll mention a skill feat I chose here, Titan Wrestler, which allows you to use maneuvers against larger creatures and pairs well with your Disarm's Trip ability. For spells, we're using Magic Missile and Sleep for damage and control respectively. Generally speaking though, we're still going to be sticking with cantrips for Spell Strike for sustained damage. At level 3, we're going to pick up Toughness as our general feat for more hit points to help with survivability. We're also going to bump our Athletics to Expert to help with combat maneuvers. For spells, we're going to pick up See Invisibility for utility and limiting our vulnerability on the battlefield. At level 4, we're picking up the basic Fury feat from the Barbarian archetype feat list, which allows us to pick up Moment of Clarity, which I discussed earlier. We picked up the Arcane Sense skill feat to give us an at-will use of Detect Magic. For spells, we are going to pick up Summon Elemental for some extra damage during hard fights. At level 5, we get 4 attribute increases, which will take our Strength to 18, Dex to 16, Constitution to 14, and Intelligence to 18. We increased our crafting skill to Expert for the feat to create magical items we will get later. We also became Expert in weapons and picked up the Martial Experience feat for our Ancestry feat, as it just seemed thematically appropriate. For spells, we are going to swap out Magic Missile and Sleep for Fireball and Lightning Bolt for some nice AoE damage ability. At level 6, we picked up the Craft Magic item skill feat and the Instinct ability feat from the Barbarian archetype, which allows us to apply our giant damage bonus while raging, which came just in time for our first damage report. Now, Pathfinder 2nd Edition doesn't have bounded accuracy, so I calculated the target ACs a little differently than Colby. I pulled the AC from what I thought were appropriate creatures for a low threat creature, a standard creature, and an extreme threat creature for each level I'm doing a damage report for, as I figured these would be a little more accurate than the lower numbers used for 5e. Also, Pathfinder 2nd Edition differs from 5th Edition in that magic items are much more available and are an expected part of a character's development. To reflect this, I'll be including a +1 striking rune, which improves damage, and a 1+1 potency rune, which improves accuracy on a weapon for the 6th and 9th level damage reports, a +2 striking and +2 potency runes on a weapon for the 13th level damage report, and a +2 striking and +3 potency runes for the 17th level damage report. So, using our Spell Striking Arcane Cascade in the first round, followed by Moment of Clarity, Spell Strike Recharge, and a basic attack in the second round, against an AC of 19, we'll do an average of 27 damage. Against an AC of 24, we'll do an average of 15 damage, and against an AC of 31, we'll do an average of 7 damage. This is about 60% of what our baseline fighter is doing with 3 basic attacks per round, so we're not looking too good so far. Luckily, this will improve later in the build, and don't forget your spells can come in handy for both utility and some Nova damage. At level 7, we get Master in Athletics and Incredible Initiative as our general feat to help us act faster in a round. Our class feature, Studious Spells, which gives us spells outside of our class spell list and gives us useful things like Enlarge for improving our damage as we go. You also get Weapon Specialization, which will give us an additional 2 damage now and 3 a bit later on, and increases our rage damage from 6 to 10. For spells, we drop See Invisibility and Summon Elemental for Dimension Door and Globe Invulnerability, giving us extra mobility and survival. At level 8, we pick up the Attack of Opportunity feat to weaponize our reaction. At level 9, we switched out Fireball and Lightning Bolt for Paralyze and Cone of Cold. We want the Paralyze to increase our chance to hit with Spell Strike and maximize damage for calculation purposes, as it causes the flat-footed condition and gives us +2 to hit. We also get Expert Spellcaster, our Perception increases to Expert, and our Will saves increase to Master. It's also time for another damage report, and remember, we'll be using the Enlarge spell and Paralyze in our damage calculations from here on out. At an AC of 22, we'll have an average of 53 damage. At an AC of 29, we'll have an average of 23 damage. At an AC of 34, we'll have an average of 15 damage. This is still slightly below baseline at lower ACs, but equal or above baseline at higher ACs. At level 10, our ability increases are Strength 19, Dex 18, Constitution 16, and Intelligence 19. We also pick up the feat Sustaining Steel. This allows us to heal hit points equal to twice the spell's level in Arcane Cascade whenever we use a leveled spell slot in Arcane Spell Strike, and allows us to end persistent negative damage for another nice little survivability boost. We pick up Recognize Spell for our skill feat to help with counterspelling. At level 11, we gain Medium Armor Expertise, and we increase Arcana to Expert. For spells, we switch out Dimension Door for Teleport for additional mobility, and Chain Lightning for Cone of Cold to give us more control over our multiple target attack spell. At level 12, we pick up the Psychic Archetype Dedication feat, choose Conservation of Energy as our Conscious Mind ability, and select Produce Flame for our Psychic Cantrip. This boosts the damage of Produced Flame from a D4 to a D6 and becomes our cantrip of choice for use with Spell Strike. Also, when you amp, which is the basic focus ability for Psychics, you Produce Flame uses a D12 die from Lee attacks, giving us a nice Nova damage boost when needed for relatively cheap cost, as focus spells can be regained with a 10-minute activity, basically making them available for every fight. We also pick up the Quick Recognition skill feat, which allows us to identify spells as a free action. At level 13, we gain the Elven Instincts Ancestry feat, giving us another +2 to initiative rolls. We also gain Weapon Mastery, increasing our chance to hit and our weapon specialization damage, just in time for our next damage report. An AC of 29, we'll have an average of 76 damage, 90 with amp. An AC of 34, we'll have an average of 48 damage, 58 with amp. And at an AC of 34, we'll have an average of 48 damage, 58 with amp. And at an AC of 40, we'll have an average of 29 damage, 32 with amp. This is the first damage report for which we are above the baseline fighters for all ACs. At level 14, we gain the Arcane Shroud class feat. It gives you a spell buff for each turn that you use Arcane Cascade, with the buff being dependent on which skill you used in Spell Strike, with some noteworthy standouts like Stone Skin and Fire Shield. You also get a general feat, and we went with Quick Identification, which allows you to identify magic items more quickly. At level 15, Our ability increases are Strength 20, Constitution 18, Intelligence 20, and Wisdom 12. Though you can move the Wisdom buff to Charisma if you prefer. For our general feat, we picked up Fast Recovery to speed up our hit point regeneration during resting and reduce poison and disease effects more quickly. We also get Greater Weapon Specialization, pushing our specialization damage to 6 and our rage damage to 18, along with Master and Fortitude saves and Legendary in Athletics. At level 16, we pick up the class feat Dispelling Spellstrike, which allows us to remove beneficial spell effects from our target, and Cloud Jump for our general feat allow us to hop around the battlefield like a Wirefu monk. At level 17, we pick up the Magic Rider Ancestry feat, which allows us to move extra targets when we use a teleportation skill. We also get Master Spellcaster and the Medium Armor Mastery abilities. For our final damage report, at an AC of 34, we'll have an average of 106 damage, 115 with amp, and at an AC of 47, we'll have an average of 25 damage, 32 with amp. As you can see, we finally broke the Centennial barrier against lower threat creatures. We are about 20% higher than our baseline fighter at all ACs, but still pretty far behind the fighter Barbarian. At 17th level, at an AC of 34, with a fighter Barbarian, we'll do an average of 148 damage. At an AC of 40, we'll have an average of 86 damage. And at an AC of 47, we'll have an average of 34 damage. So if straight damage is all you're looking for, then the fighter Barbarian is the way to go. If, however, you like the flexibility of spellcasting and the possibility of much greater Nova damage as the situation calls for it, the Magus Barbarian Psychic build is the better choice. As for the Fighter Barbarian build, the main changes were that we picked up the Power Attack, Furious Focus, Brutal Finish feat chain to reduce the multiple attack penalty from Power Attack to -5, and to give your second attack an extra weapon damage die. We also picked up the Adopted Ancestry feat to get access to Lizardman feats, and picked up the Scion Ancestry feat to become permanently large for the +2 bonus to damage. In regards to attributes, we took Con to 20, and Intelligence became the dump stat, allowing us to get better hit points and a small Charisma bump over Wisdom for intimidation purposes. Final thoughts. This was interesting for me because, at least in this instance, combining spellcasting with melee resulted in decreased damage compared to the straight martial class build, which is the opposite of what happens in 5e, where classes that can utilize spells readily outshine their martial counterparts. One of the things I've heard about Pathfinder 2nd Edition is that the 3-action economy allows for more flexible gameplay, but I didn't really see that while building this character, at least not while I was trying to maximize my sustained damage output. One thing I found interesting, at least at level 15 for the lower AC monsters, both the Magus and Fighter builds did more damage with just 3 basic attacks than using their class-specific feats, which is counter to what I hear a lot of Pathfinder YouTube players saying about taking all three actions to attack. They generally say it isn't worth it. This makes me wonder if any of them have bothered to crunch the numbers, or if I did something wrong with my math. Okay, everyone, until next time, remember, friends that slay together, stay together.